Welcome to The Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. I'm Marc Cashman, here with my co-host, who I always want to be my co-host, Chris McNulty.
Thanks, Marc. Today, we're talking about the cloud with two Microsoft MVPs. We'll talk about moving to the cloud and what that means for customers' collaboration, development, and security.
We spoke with Martina Grom, CEO of @Work, and Marc Anderson, president of Simpraxis Consulting, both knowledgeable, seasoned subject matter experts and trusted MVPs with feedback to Microsoft and, of course, valuable support to their customers.
You know, Martina and Marc definitely bring different perspectives, and not just because they are looking at things from the opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean, but I've known both of them for years. Marc, obviously, from my hometown of Boston, and Martina being engaged in the community. I think it's really interesting to look at it both from a technology perspective and a customer perspective. And they can put on each of those hats in turn, and I'm really looking forward to where today's discussion goes.
Me too. I always am interested in what's the non-Microsoft perspective, not always different, but maybe just a different point of view or a lot more different information versus pushing the feature as in then the reality of what does the customer actually need. But they're also just two people that I always find have a different perspective. They think about things differently. They're seasoned in the way that we were talking about, where they've been through a lot. So they know not just what the feature is and does, but they know how people want it to be, what are some of the practices they put around it to make sure it lands right. But again, always very interested to get their perspective and really pleased that we were able to chat with them.
At Microsoft, we can always count on our MVPs to act on behalf of customers and let us know when we're doing something that's great or when we're doing something that's slightly less than. And today you'll get a chance to see how awesome that is in a public forum.
Yeah, and we cover a bunch of different areas, so hopefully there'll be a gem or two or three or four that you'll glom onto and get a lot from both Martina and Marc.
So today, our discussion with Martina Grom and Marc Anderson on their perspective of how to approach the move to and adoption of the Microsoft Cloud.
Welcome, everybody, today to the Cloud Roundtable discussion with two great Microsoft MVPs. Chris McNulty and I are here going to be asking them a lot of questions around multiple topics. We'll do quick introductions of who we've got joining us. We've got everybody from across the United States and into Europe. So we've got a number of people. First, we'll start with Martina Grom. She's a CEO at @Work. Martina, where are you dialing in from?
Good evening and good day, guys. My name is Martina Grom, and I'm currently in Austria. I'm 20 kilometers south of Vienna.
I think it's a wonderful...
It's summertime here.
Marc Anderson, president from Simpraxis Consulting. Marc, tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and who you are.
Hi. Well, I'm in an undisclosed location. That's the problem.
Ooh, very nice.
No, I'm in Rhode Island. We have a place on the coast here, and we moved down here for the summer. So believe it or not, it's beautiful out, but I'm hiding in a corner on the inside.
All right, so we got two people enjoying the sunny summer. And our third presenter who's joining us here is Chris McNulty. If you all know the podcast that we do, The Intrazone, Chris is my co-host, but he's so much more. Chris, from Microsoft Senior Product Manager.
Thanks, Marc.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll have a great discussion. We're going to move right into topic number one. So to the panel, to everybody, what is the first thing that you recommend to customers when they first move to the cloud? This is the early discussion. They're on premises or they're just starting to dip their toe in the cloud. Starting with Marc.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, whether you're on-prem or in the cloud, from an end user perspective, how different is it really? You're logging into a browser and you're seeing your stuff. I think the conversations actually are more complicated when you talk to technical people. And there you're talking about things like, the rapid pace of change in a software as a service offering, the security aspects of having your content in the cloud, the way your users have to start to think about change management. But the end users don't mind it. They don't have really any opinion about it. They just like it when it's there and it's a good solution.
And when you think about the duration of those types of conversations, they start at a certain time. When is it if people really do start to think about yes for the cloud? How long is that discussion and a challenging discussion just in the beginning or all the way through until there's those distinct proof points?
Right. Well, I think everybody thinks that they're unique. and that their particular requirements or concerns or whatever it is are different than everybody else's when it comes to moving to the cloud. But I think when most of the time when people look at the economics and they look at the fact that you guys manage, if we're talking about Office 365, of course, but if you guys are going to manage the hardware and software upgrades and all of that sort of stuff for them, it starts to make sense. I find that there's some sort of tipping point that happens in organizations. Usually I'm not there for that. They're reading, they're seeing what's going on. It's often the CTO or the CEO who says, well, wait a minute, why are we spending all this money? And we're not very good at it. So let's start looking at the cloud. Different industries are moving at a different rate. Different companies or organizations that are older, I think, tend to have longer conversations about it than startups, for example. So there's no one answer to those questions, I don't think.
Martina, any thoughts when you think of either the most senior level people at a business making the decision through to the IT department to the end users? Any additional thoughts about what you talk about with your customers?
Yeah, I think the main difference is when you talk to IT and technical people, very often I see them that they are looking at the migration like it is a migration to any other system. So they try to start the migration, and when they are done, they think they have peace or a quiet time for the next 3 years. And the main part I talk with my customers about is that I say, okay, we are moving into an evergreen service. We need to look at the services. We need to build skills within the technical people and get some kind of development in there so that they get used to use an evergreen service, that they get used to the pace of Office 365, how it's moving forward. And when you talk to the business, it's always around use cases. So they ask me, what are other customers doing? What can I do better? I'm in a digitalization project. So how can I do that? And how can I accomplish my daily business? And how can I ease up my daily work?
So they're obviously hoping for that promise of something a little bit better, are honest and open to obviously the how to get there. And if you blend that with what Marc was saying, there of course are hurdles and ways of thinking about what are we doing today. We still have to do some of that tomorrow, but why not adjust it so it has actually more of a return? So Chris, I know you work with a lot of our partners, obviously beyond the MVPs that we're talking to here today. When you think about your partner program or just some of the things you're hearing from customers, how would you summarize some of those early concerns and maybe what you hear partners sharing with our customers?
I think that the biggest thing to remember is people are afraid of change. And in a cloud migration, people are looking to minimize change management by trying to make sure that everything is intact exactly the way it ever was. And I'd say that that's really difficult because the cloud does work somewhat differently. And the other thing about it, and this is sort of career planning for IT professionals, is the cloud is different and better in many ways. And we talk to a lot of customers in particular who say they don't want their cloud movement to just be a change in the data center. You used to have Exchange and SharePoint and Skype running in a organization data center, and now they're running in a Microsoft data center. Being able to look at things like Teams or Planner or some of the intrinsic capabilities that you see in SharePoint and OneDrive, there's more there and it's better. And so it's much better, it's much simpler to get people to adopt new technologies and to accept change if the change is an improvement rather than a detriment. So lean into the fact that change is going to happen, but don't change everything all at once.
So I would just have one last thought before we move to topic 2. Across the years at the different events and talking with different customers, the question a long time ago used to be, tell me about Office 365. What is this cloud? How is it different from on-prem? And now the leading question that I get, and I think it's just more of where the discussion starts, at least for me, is I have Office 365. Tell me what I should do now or next. So different change of mind, but certainly how they get there, I think, is very mindful. So topic number 2, development, I will be honest here, I'm not a developer, but when you think about distinguishing the types of development, whether they're a blocker on how people move to the cloud, or just the ways that they should think about building custom or configured applications, when you think of out-of-the-box configuration and customization, how do you approach that conversation? And I'd like to start with Martina, specifically around when it gets to that level of customization. We'll move to Marc, and then maybe Chris, we can talk a little bit more about out-of-box or configured solutions. Martina, when you think about distinguishing between when somebody highly customizes versus uses out-of-the-box, how do you approach that?
I approach most of the time out of the box and standardization, because I see when customers move to Office 365 or SharePoint Online, they want to have kind of their style in their communication sites, team sites, or in the teams, but they're quite happy with the content in that. And very often we discuss, do we need heavy customizations on the SharePoint intranet site, or do we need a custom design there? And very often people just love the new designs SharePoint is providing, and we try to move with that. The reason for that is because it's moving very fast, it's developing. And you stay with the templates you get into SharePoint Online, you're always on the safe side. If you start with heavy customizations, you're probably breaking your intranet site one in a time. So it could happen that way. On the other side, what we do in configuration and customization is when something is not available in the standard solution or out of the box, or if the customer wants to have a selected app like a Power App or anything else within that, then we start with customizations and we build solutions into the standardized websites.
Marc, is that something that you're also seeing, that challenge of, when to use customizations in terms of, you should actually not do it until you need to, or you take a different approach?
No, I agree with everything that Martina said. And the interesting thing to me is that this conversation really shouldn't be any different than what we said 10 years ago or 15 years ago. If you don't need to write code, don't write code. And I think we've actually been able to use moving to the cloud as almost a lever to make that conversation easier. Because if you think about how, if you're in an organization and you've got X dollars to invest, what's the most important thing to do? Invest on getting those pixels in the right row on the left side of the screen? Or is it focusing on the things that makes this organization actually run better or be unique? And that's the stuff that I think where we should be spending our time doing actual code writing, customization, is the things that are going to make this business more efficient, more collaborative, more effective. The visual stuff never does that, ever. A lot of marketing and communications people, if they're out there, are cringing when I say that. but I think we've moved forward a generation for those people, and rather than thinking about the things that are on websites as print, the way we thought about print, we're thinking of it more as the digital workplace, all those phrases that I never can remember. So focusing on what really matters for where you take the time to build things, I think, is the key. The out-of-the-box UI is gorgeous. And if you don't like it, then maybe this isn't the product for you, depending on, it doesn't matter what product we talk about. But that sort of subjective, I don't like that blue color, is never what makes an organization more successful.
So it's important to know that we've switched from blue to teal, so that that blue that nobody seemed to like, now teal is replacing all of that.
Everybody wants to change the colors, but
and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of where people, should focus in terms of the business. And specific to that, Chris, you work a lot with our Power Apps and Flow team, and of course, providing those solutions, some that are actually released as samples. But when you think about distinguishing, that customization effort specific to business solutions, how do you see people using the tools and what we're doing with them to try to give people the right tools so that they're not developing themselves into a corner and a huge budget to get it done?
Yeah, I think that thing to remember, I could only amplify what Marc just said in particular about Are you really going to get a better color red than the one that comes out of the box is debatable. I think the same thing applies to business process and recognizing that each organization has its own competitive advantages. And the ways that you customize, the ways that you develop custom solutions on the platform should reflect those competitive advantages. It's turning whatever your organization's intellectual property is through its way of doing business into something that is standardized and codified, literally, in the applications that you build. We provide, for example, capabilities out of the box that allow you to do approvals of documents. You could use those in, for example, before you send documents out to customers when they're final. Do you need to change that? Do you need to write something from scratch? Really depends on what your business is. If your business is predicated on, we have a meticulous 47-step quality control documented approval system so that anything that gets publicly released, like we stand behind it, well, that's part of your competitive advantage. And that's a good place to focus on customization because what we have out of the box isn't that. But looking left to right across not just your industry, but other industries, understand where what you do is likely to be similar to what someone in a different line of business does, and recognize that we have many of those intrinsic capabilities built, and we're adding more all the time. So remember to just come back and refresh yourself on what out of the box is. Out of the box used to only change every 3 years. Out of the box now changes every 3 minutes.
Yeah, I would just add one last thought that, as people look at this decision point, as they're working through what is the solution that we need, how are we going to do it, do we hire internally, externally? I think the best thing is that there are options. I think used to be that people thought the cloud was this black box that they couldn't develop for, and specifically for our larger partners, our ISVs, they couldn't design these broader solutions to augment and enhance some of the things that we were doing. But the fact remains that the SharePoint framework is extending, into the web development space, and obviously, if you've got in-house developers, they can learn this stuff very easily. And when you don't need them, I think that's to be very mindful of when you don't need them. So next thing we're going to move into is to talk about a tip of the week really quick. If you've never used the OneDrive app for scanning, it's something that we'd love to encourage you to give a try. So you can scan and capture business receipts when you're on the go, and you can do this directly into the OneDrive mobile app. And the great thing about it, specifically when you're thinking around using this for business purposes, is you can put it directly into the desired folder with metadata intact. So you can choose whatever column somebody has created in the library, you can fill that out and put it in there pretty quickly. And I'll give you the quickest demo that I can do in sort of a meta way, where I've got a receipt here and scanning it in, and it'll be a little hard for me to press the button, but you basically put your receipt down, it finds it, and then you click capture. And just to let you know, Marc Anderson, this is a receipt from a business on Anderson Road. It's a 76. I filled up some gas for a business trip that I was doing. So download the OneDrive mobile app, give it a try. That's our tip of the week. I'll quickly here, before we move on to the topic, any of the three of you actually used this scenario or others with one other little tip on top of it?
I tend to use that scanning feature the most when I'm at conferences and I'm taking pictures of screens. And I used to use, just drawing a blank, the old app. Yeah, the other Office Lens. Office Lens, sorry, drew a blank. I used to use Office Lens, and then now I use the OneDrive Scan, and it's great for taking pictures of things at weird angles, like that receipt. That receipt was at a very strange angle, and it sort of figures out, how to straighten it out and how to turn it into something really useful.
And I'll tell you, the tip within the tip is that the Office Lens technology is what's now actually the same code that's baked right into the OneDrive mobile app.
Right.
So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next topic, but certainly give OneDrive mobile app a try. Do your first scan today. Let us know how it went. So this next one is all about collaboration, and I thought I would kick it off here because this is a little bit compared to the other topics in my wheelhouse. But when we think of collaboration these days, whether you're thinking in terms of just moving your workloads up into the cloud, whether that's files, whether that's conversations, email, calendar, certainly from a migration perspective, we hope that getting there intact is something that you can do. But we want to change the mindset a little bit when you think about moving to the cloud, specifically for collaboration, is that it is not just moving files from A to B, but it's actually moving from on-premises to a level of technology that gives you greater capabilities, lots of other different integrated tools, and specifically one that we lead with for collaboration is Microsoft Teams. And to be frank, we're using Microsoft Teams right now to come to you live as a live meeting, but certainly can be leveraged for one-to-one conversations, team conversations, and live meetings like we're doing. And on top of that, it's a really great place to collaborate with others with conversation right next to whatever it is your asset is, a document, a page, a news article, or even something as robust as a list or some of the customizations we were just talking about. So we really want to promote that when you're moving for collaboration purposes to the cloud, you really are moving from on-prem, whatever you have, into this Microsoft Teams world that offers a whole host of integrated experiences that we're doing a lot of research and development to make sure they're consistent experiences that span beyond just how you may have shared things in email or had discussions through another chat mechanism, but without that connected experience. I'll throw this first to Marc. Are you seeing this move, this adoption, or even just people piloting Microsoft Teams as something as a destination from on-premises, or thinking about it differently?
I definitely think it's something that is getting people more interested in moving to your cloud. I'm going to say something sacrilegious here, but having been doing this kind of work for a really, really, really long time, people are really bad at collaborating. The technology doesn't make that happen. So I think the technology is a tool that can help enable it, but a lot of the work that you really need to do when you're inside an organization, and as an outside consultant, I can only help while I'm there, is to think about how you help people think about different ways of working that will make them better at what they do. I do think that Teams is a great tool set to help enable that, because letting people interact in a more synchronous way than what we're used to with email, and I'm a voluminous email writer, so I sort of miss some of that action. But being able to just reach out to Julie at Simpraxis and say, hey Julie, do you have that piece of paper for me? Or what's this client doing? That's so much more effective than trying to write some big long email or treat it as an asynchronous conversation. But again, I do think that people are generally bad at collaborating because there are a lot of fear drives people's behavior in the workplace. Thinking about how Teams fits into your portfolio of communication mechanisms and where it's going to serve the best purposes inside your organization, but based on your particular organizational culture, is I think how you'll succeed in using Teams as part of your technology.
We'll just keep things moving. Martina, how people can think about either moving to Teams or just that general notion of how do you think about collaboration in this new world as they think through their new modern workplace, digital initiatives, however they frame it. What are you telling them?
What I see is Microsoft Teams is kind of a game changer for many people who are moving to the cloud, because people work together in a very convenient way in a client they really like, because they see everything on one place. So they do not need to switch or move forward into browser tabs on different sites and so on. So everything for them, so the perception is that everything is in one place. And people really like that. And also what I see is that Microsoft Teams is one of the clients who really, we talked a lot about, will email survive as a most used collaboration tool? And it will for sure for the next foreseeable future. But within a team or within an organization, people really try to move over to team collaboration, to team communication, and to have everything there. And today I was with a customer and they told me that management who travels a lot, that the most thing they complain about is that they say, I can't work with Teams if I'm on a plane and do not have an internet connection, but they really enjoy it when I'm online and I can work everywhere with my Microsoft Teams client. So people really adopt it very easily. And they also understand how to work within Teams and how to use it and how to give it structure and new functionalities. And some of my other customers who are really in the early adopter stage, they said, oh, we need to build SPFX apps and integrate them into Teams, because then we have a client where also our organizational apps are present and people can work with them.
I think promoting Teams, especially as something that has that new flexibility, you know, certainly is something that, is something that if people haven't tried it or they haven't tried something like it, having things that are more consolidated, I think just a fresher experience. One of the things I was going to throw to Chris before we move on to the next topic is, from this perspective of moving from on-premises into Microsoft Teams, and you look at it through the mobile lens, Chris, you and I have on a previous episode of the Interzone have talked about this desktop diet and moving to being mobile. When you think about that mobility in this space, what does that mean for moving to on-premises to be able to do so much, and specifically maybe talk about the Microsoft Teams mobile app through that lens?
So let's talk a little bit about governance and structure of how you approach Teams. It's a little more than just saying, well, Teams is wonderful, it can change your organization, although it can. In the same way, if you're coming from a SharePoint perspective, when you go to a SharePoint site and you see that all they have is a document library and they've never changed a page or anything, it tells you that they may not be leaning into all of the capabilities for collaboration. In the same way that when I go to a team, if I see all they really have is chat and the Files tab, and there's been no customization, it suggests to me they haven't leaned into it. What that usually means is that every time someone has a need to set up another project, they just stand up a new team. Rather than a channel in an existing team, they're setting up team. That's not bad, but when you bring it into a mobile form factor, understand that the breadth of navigation is much more difficult on mobile. You're relying on search and other capabilities. So bringing more things into the same team is a better predictor of success. We know, we've done research on this in SharePoint, we're starting to see the same trends in Teams, that if you take an active customization steps on a site or on a team to add tabs, to add channels, to do more than just the out-of-box experience, you have a 50% at least more engaging site and a greater likelihood that 3 months later, that team is going to be part of everyone's daily habit and how they communicate. Really important on a mobile form factor so that people don't have to hunt for the right team to start their collab.
Couldn't agree with you more, and obviously agree with everybody. But on that mobile perspective, it is such a breath of fresh air to be able to join a meeting, to see the content, to hear the people, and to then be able to access it later and continue the conversation offline, right from where it is that I may have just 5 minutes to do it without pulling out my laptop to accomplish something that might have been a difficult or more involving task. To be able to do it right in the mobile and to do it quickly is great. So moving into topic number 3, which is security, and I want to jump right to Martina to get your thoughts. I bet when you talk with CSOs around the world, they have concerns around security. How do you begin that conversation and start to dispel what I think is most misperception about the cloud, but honest curiosity and concern? How do you approach that?
The best way to talk about security is to show them and to prove how secure Microsoft 365 can be if you do it right. So very often I start with a workshop day or a talk about a couple of hours where I just show them what the functionality is, how secure it is. And given the fact I'm living in Europe, we are very sensible when it comes to privacy and security. I had a lot of work to do in the past couple of years to prove that Microsoft 365 is a secure service, so that data is stored in European data centers, everything is on the right place, and so on. And currently, very often I see that people from the CSO office or the security officers are currently driving Microsoft 365 projects because they say, oh, we are maybe a lot more secure in using those services in the cloud as we can be on premises with our small IT department or in our small organization. And the first thing I very often talk with customers is so very often I get the question, what are the 3 things you would do in every Office 365 project you start with? And my first thing is always MFA, so that users have a second factor to authenticate themselves. And then we talk about self-service password reset. Not a lot about encryption in the beginning. It's more about access policies, how people can securely access their data. Are they allowed to download stuff there and things like that? And people really like the enhanced security they get.
Marc, are you hearing some of that same, as far as the same concerns, or if you are hearing the same concerns, what are some of the other things that you let them know as far as your experience about what we're doing and the experience of other customers?
Yeah. I don't have these conversations probably as much as Martina does, but I do get dragged into them once in a while. I think the one of the big things that we can definitely say is, you guys on premises do this as best you can with the people that you can hire, but Microsoft does this at the expense of their revenue. If Microsoft screws this up, it could kill the company. So by saying that, it sort of brings it into focus for people that, they're going to hire some junior guy who just got out of college to run the servers. That's a very different thing than having Microsoft run things for you. So that just saying that often makes a big difference. The other part, I often like to talk about your fear-based conversations. When you talk to security people, it's more about what they think it might happen than what they actually should want. So I try to get at, well, tell me what your requirements are. Is it, that people shouldn't be able to log in from home? I mean, what is the thing that you're trying to do? And that conversation is often very interesting because they can't answer those questions. They just say, well, I'm worried that somebody's going to, no, that's not a requirement, that's a worry. And so we can't address a worry. You can worry if we lock it up in a lead box, but if you tell us what your requirements are, then we can try to address them more clearly. And then I think the final thing I'd like to just mention is I see a lot of people going to Office 365 or other cloud services for that matter inside the business, because IT has made doing things internally so objectionable, so hard, so slow, so secure, big air quotes around that word, security by impossibility, that going to Office 365 or another cloud service is almost like a breath of fresh air. Geez, it loads in my browser so fast. So business people love the fact that they can escape that lockdown that they're sort of trapped in. And I think that probably is going to continue as a wave, and the security organizations are going to have to really start rethinking the way they offer the services to the organization, as opposed to just how do we keep people out of things.
So, Chris, last thoughts on security when you think of that conversation that you've had, or the research and development and the effort that we put into it to make things as secure and to offer all of the governance controls and everything that we have. Last thoughts on security and building confidence with customers?
Confidence is not a requirement. Confidence is a feeling. And I'm not minimizing that when I say that. One of the things that I say when I talk to customers is that trust is not a product. Trust is a value that Microsoft has to earn and re-earn every day we open for business, and that's every day. What does all that mean? Consider the very close relationship between security and compliance. And it's the breadth of capability that gives people confidence. So one of the things that we find is when people see, not only is there support for things like two-factor authentication, but there's support for dynamically configuring automatic application of retention policy, or being able to use conditional access policies to determine when to prompt for a secondary PIN if someone is coming in from a remote location or an unknown device, or the ability to apply DLP and e-discovery. It's the whole range of capability that usually gives the business side much more confidence in owning the solutions. We can deal with some of the technical requirements around audit log immutability, and we can get down in the weeds with those things. But in general, looking at the breadth of capabilities, and there's a white paper that we maintain on our Content Services Resource Center that details all of those capabilities. Looking at security and compliance together gives people much more confidence than just looking at compliance alone, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I would say to summarize, into this topic and move to our very last fun question, everything that Martina outlined as far as three main things to think about, blending that with the general worry that we think a lot of people have and we hear, that Marc shared with what you hear from customers is this general concern or worry, and start to move that into features, some of which Chris described. There is the depth of what we offer for us to be very transparent in what we offer, and our goals should be very clear. It is your data, and we want to keep it as secure as possible with the best collaborative ways to share it as close to the chest as you need it to be, or as broadly as you need it to be once it's ready to open it up to the entire company or even beyond to your external users. So great insights around security. We know it's important and a concern of our customers, and it's really great to hear from the three of you about how you approach it in that conversation. So the last one, which is a fun one, I hope that there's been a recent book or a movie that you've read or seen that you're willing to share. And I'll start out here just with something that I've liked about the book that I'm reading. I'm reading a book by Daniel Suarez, who is sort of a techno thriller writer. And I've read every one of his books, and his latest one is called Delta V. And I'm about about half of the way through. And so far, it's all about recruiting a bunch of these people, men and women who are crazy adventurers and have some of these huge minds to go and mine meteorites for crazy material to bring back to Earth to sustain life beyond what eventually will be the apocalypse. So that's what I'm reading these days, keeping me afloat. Marc, what is keeping you afloat with either a book or a movie you've recently seen that you want to share?
I'm reading a book that I find is really cool. I don't read a lot of science fiction, but I do read mostly fiction, and it's called, I have to look on my screen because I can't remember the name. It's called Fall or a Dodge in Hell, and it's about a guy who leaves in his will that he wants to be preserved or frozen or something. But actually, one of the most fascinating things about the book is how social media starts to disintegrate because of misinformation, and how the social media world starts to attack that by having editors for each person who sort of sift through things and stop the junk from getting to you. So I think it's a good techie read.
Very nice. To Martina, and get your last thoughts on what you're reading or a movie that you've seen that you want to share and a little bit about it.
The last movie I've seen was actually Avengers Endgame. For people who know me, I'm a big science fiction fan, and I like everything around that and technology and so on. So I didn't watch every Marvel movie, but I like the Avengers series a lot. And when you have seen Infinity War, you have to go into Endgame to see how they put all the storylines together and finalize the story. And what I like about that is that we have an idea about what people can accomplish if they work together and if they build up a team, and how they can save the world, which could be true for every one of us, because we all can be superheroes if we want to be a superhero. And I like that kind of stories a lot.
I love it. I love it. Well, to get us to Chris to hear his book or movie, Martina, I've got one request. Could you do your best Thanos snap? And I will time it to get us right to Chris on 3, 2, 1. I heard it. Chris, your favorite book or movie that you've recently read and something about it?
Yeah, so the book I'm reading is Empire on the Edge by Nick Bunker. It's written from a British point of view about how did the American Revolution come to be? How did people who identified themselves as being principally British come to identify themselves as something other? You can think of it as change management on a continental scale. So, and I have it in paper because I was starting it at the beach last week, and I am a highly digital person, but sometimes I just treat myself to reading on paper because that's a privilege.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like everybody's having a really nice summer from a non-work perspective. And we will wrap up here and just make sure that we hope everybody who's listening to this today or on demand. And thank you for joining us. Hope you're having a great summer. Hope you're reading a lot of great books, seeing a lot of great movies, and of course, doing a lot of great thinking about the cloud, what you're going to do next in the cloud. Or if you have these open questions, Want to make sure that you know who the presenters are, how to reach out to them, get their thoughts beyond today's webinar. Reach out to Martina, reach out to Marc, reach out to Chris or myself. You have all the information here in terms of how to reach them through Twitter, but definitely encourage a discussion either with them or with your peers in your region, where you are, in your industry, to get a great sense of how you can think about moving to the cloud, collaborating in the cloud, being secure, and then, of course, around solutions, how you can develop in the cloud. So quick thank you to all of you presenters. Thank you, Martina, for joining us today. Marc, thanks for joining us from the East Coast. Chris, thanks for joining in from where you're at. I think home here, just a little bit north from where I'm at in Redmond. And I will say thanks for listening. Thanks for joining in, and hope you all have a great day. So thank you all, and have a great, great rest of your day.
Up next, let's take a look at some upcoming events. We love SharePoint Saturdays. They're a great way for everyone in the community to connect with each other, with experts from Microsoft, and sometimes with folks from the Microsoft product engineering teams. They're held on Saturdays around the world. There are dozens that happen throughout the year. And of course, they're free.
So August 17th, first one after this show airs, is in Lima, Peru. You can follow the action on Twitter following the Twitter handle @SPSLima_. We'll make sure that there's a link in the show notes. And this particular one is taking place at the Microsoft Peru building on the Victor Andres Ballond Avenue. Can't miss it if you're familiar with Lima, which I bet you are if you live there, or SharePoint Saturdays are always worth traveling to.
Jumping back across the Atlantic on August 31st, SPS Central Europe at SPS_events. This will be held at the Technopark in Zurich, Switzerland.
Yeah, and this brings together a lot of great speakers in that region, so expect a lot of great local content that's very relevant and, of course, related to where you live if you live in Central Europe. So we hope you always think about SharePoint Saturdays as something you can opt into on a Saturday to get some free training, connect with your local community, and, of course, learn a ton and share your feedback.
I like to go to SharePoint Saturdays on Sundays. I find the seating is better.
It's much better. Parking's better, too.
Yes.
The next is the SharePoint Fest Seattle. This is August 19th to the 23rd, and that's sharepointfest.com/Seattle. Here you'll find 2 keynotes, one Microsoft and one in an outside perspective, pre-event workshops. There are about 150 breakout sessions. There'll be a Microsoft AMA and a ton more. There's really something for everyone at a SharePoint Fest, specifically around SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Azure, BI, you name it, they'll have it for both IT, dev, and users.
Coming up later in August, you can definitely tell that the multiverse is starting to explode as the children start disappearing into school. SP TechCon Boston coming back again, August 25th to 28th. It'll cover a broad range of SharePoint and Office 365 topics, half-day and full-day workshops, a Microsoft keynote, general sessions, and so much more. Visit sptechcon.com/east and on Twitter @sptechcon.
And I'm just going to tee up the next one, but for you to describe, because I think you're actually attending it. It is the Quest The Experts Conference in Charleston, South Carolina. Tell us about that.
That's right. So Quest is a longtime partner of Microsoft. I was at Quest 10 years ago. Quest became part of Dell. It broke up. It reformed. And Quest is going back to their roots. The Quest Experts Conference is a chance to bring hundreds of people together to talk about Quest and Microsoft technologies across a broad range of identity and security and database management, collaboration technologies. There'll be a lot of sessions on SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. I'll be speaking there about Teams and SharePoint integration as part of my core note session. So that'll be August 27th to 28th. The URL is long, so we'll just put those in the show notes.
And the last one we want to always note as we lead up to it, because it's a big event for Microsoft, it is Ignite 2019. That will be in Orlando, Florida this year, November 4th through the 8th. This is where you can expect to connect with 25,000 other individuals across 1,000 sessions focused on software development, security, architecture, IT sessions galore. There'll be about 200 plus hands-on experiences where there'll be the innovation centers around security, cloud, and hybrid. Of course, there's a vision keynote with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, followed by technology keynotes to get the latest Microsoft news right from the Microsoft tech leaders and, of course, some of our featured customers. Thank you to our guests, Martina Grom from Outwork and Marc Anderson from Simpraxis Consulting.
Check out our show page for links to all of what was discussed today and more. Go to aka.ms/theintrozone.
If you'd like to reach out with questions or feedback for the SharePoint engineering team and product teams, please email us at theinterzone@microsoft.com or via Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues about the show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to download them so you can enjoy them, even if you're climbing a mountain ridge somewhere in the North Cascades.
Definitely load up your podcast player when you're traveling. We love to join you on all of your travels. Thanks so much for listening. We're your hosts, Marc Cashman and Chris McNulty, and you've been listening to The Interzone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.